Welcome back to season 2 of the Rebalance Earth podcast, where we have important conversations with extraordinary people, all focused on creating a world worth living in. Enjoy. I'm here with Pugh. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lewis for about 5-6 years, an extraordinary person. And, you know, if you don't know Lewis, we should all be incredibly grateful for the work he does. He's literally at the forefront of climate change. But I wanted to just dive straight in, if I may. In the UK, we've literally gone from drought to flooding. And I know you've experienced flooding, and not everyone has experienced flooding. Can you take us back to being a small boy, and what does that feel like to experience being in a flood?
Yeah, you'll never, ever understand flooding until you've actually been in a flood. And 28th of December, 1979 is a day which is etched into the memory of my family. We lived in Tavistock. We lived right next to the River Tavy. And for the previous month, it had been raining day after day after day after day. And then the river started rising. And then it was early evening, and the water was starting to come up into the garden and then towards the house. And I remember my father saying, I better go and save the car, because it was on high ground and he wanted to drive it onto even higher ground. And he left the house, and I remember seeing him virtually wash down the river. The water surrounding him and pushing him, and he got to the car and he started up the car, and then he drove out through the water, and the water was, over his tires. And then eventually he got back to the house, and it was early evening, and you're all on your own then. There was nobody that was going to come and save us. And there was just nobody there. And then the water came up and up and up, and then it started coming in through the doors and through the windows. And it's something which you never forget. It's the mud, it's the stench, it's waking up the next day and realizing that all your hopes and dreams have gone, and you have to start again. And I remember the insurance assessor coming along, and we had to have new carpets, and it was 1979, and my father had decided that we were about to go and emigrate out to South Africa. And so the house was up for sale. Yeah. And he immediately had to take the house up for sale, and his dream about moving, retiring out to South Africa, where his mother had come from, was just gone. I think, when you see these floods on television and you kind of think you understand what it means, I think every CEO, when there's a flood, actually needs to go there. They need to go into the houses, and they need to see what actually happens.
Yeah, I mean, the frightening thing is that's 1979, right? So let's think about what's happened to global temperatures, precipitation, the number of... Back in 1979, that would have been seen as a natural disaster. But these are now systemically locked in. People literally, we're filming this at the end of September, flooding in Wales, in Warrington. They say in the UK, if you've been flooded, exactly as described, that 90% of people feel some kind of mental health issue for 2 years afterwards. That, the impact. I've got a friend who lives in Tewkesbury, and their house has been flooded like 7 or 8 times in the last 12 years, and basically their house is worthless because of this issue. And yet, for some reason, we still think it's unnatural. We don't take responsibility that this is what's happening today as a function of the decisions we've been making since 1979.
My parents were obviously worried about the house and the contents of the house. I was worried about my life and my father's life. So it was, it was that serious.
Terrifying watching your dad go out to get the car. Just moving on to sort of slightly happier times. I mean, people can hear it. You're born in the UK, you're from Plymouth, but you're also from South Africa. You talked about moving to South Africa. So why don't you tell us about, when did you fall in love with nature? What was that point that, is etched in your memory?
Yeah, so eventually they sold the house. We then moved out to South Africa, and we moved to an area in the Eastern Cape. And I remember my parents took me to the Addo Elephant National Park. And I'll never ever forget it, because we drove into the national park and we were going down this little dirt road, and suddenly we were surrounded by this huge herd of African elephants. I mean, it's so many of them. And I was sitting in the back of the car with my sister Caroline, and it was just so exciting. We were in Africa, and this is where my love for the environment and love for nature really began.
And Lewis, I mean, you're a lawyer, but really for the last 35 years, you're an extreme swimmer. And we watch Olympic athletes, and I've had the pleasure of following some of your insane swims all over the world. In the Arctic, the longest swim. I think that's where we first met. But then, I saw you at COP28. You swam across the Red Sea. You swam the Hudson. What made you pivot from being a lawyer to using swimming as a way to send a message to the world that this is serious? This is the issue that we need to fix.
So I'd been visiting the Arctic for a couple of years, I think 5 years, and every single year I started seeing the sea ice getting thinner and thinner and the sea getting warmer and warmer. And I think then there comes a moment when you think, okay, what do I need to do? What can I as one individual do? And I had noticed how swimming, especially in extreme places, really got so much media attention. And I thought to myself, why don't I try go all the way to the North Pole? So to the most northern place in the whole world, and try and do a swim there. I mean, you shouldn't be able to do a swim there. That place has been frozen over for thousands and thousands of years. And in 2007, they were starting to see really big open patches of sea at the North Pole. And so I took a ship all the way to the North Pole, and I did a 1 kilometer swim across there. And that swim took me 18 minutes and 50 seconds, and it felt like 18 hours in the water. It was so cold.
It's just for our listeners. Can you just explain just how cold it is? Like, I always think about the temperature of the swimming pool when I go swimming with my girls. You swam the channel a couple of times. Just how cold is it?
It's really, really cold. Okay. And this is the difficulty with this swim, which is I'm trying to convey a message about how the world is heating up. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to get really cold. So a normal indoor swimming pool is about 27 degrees centigrade. If you swim in the English Channel today, it's somewhere between 16 and 18, depending on where you are. Then go all the way down to just 5. That's the temperature of the water in which the passengers of the Titanic perished. Fresh water freezes at 0. Water at the North Pole is even colder. It's salt water. It was minus 1.7 degrees centigrade. It's 29 degrees Fahrenheit. It's unbelievably cold. And the doctor who was supervising the swim, he said to me, I saw you go in as one person and you came out a completely different person. And I think that's actually correct, because I went in there determined to try and show the world how this place, which I had been visiting, I'd been visiting the Arctic for the 5 previous summers. I'd seen the water getting warmer. I'd seen less and less sea ice. But I really wanted the world to know how quickly this was happening. You shouldn't be able to swim across the North Pole. And I came out a different person. I realized I now had to take this message around the world. And so every single year, I now do another swim. And maybe it's one centered around climate change. Maybe it's one centered around loss of biodiversity. Or maybe it's one centered around pollution. But every single year, I try to get world leaders to look at things in a different way and understand that in various parts of the world, in some of the most fragile ecosystems, they are right on the edge.
And I want to come back to that. And just for everyone, Lewis did 18 minutes and 50 seconds. So he swam 1 kilometer. You can go on YouTube and watch this swim. I do a little bit of, I like to do an ice plunge. Like if I can get to 5 minutes, I feel proud of myself. You were talking before, I asked you, do you feel permanently cold? Because in that video, you talk about a training dive just before you get to the North Pole. And I think you say you had to shower for like 50 minutes after being in the water for just a minute or two.
Yeah. When you've been really, really, really cold, you never quite warm up, because that cold is deep down in your bones and you never quite thaw out. because you always remember it. And so every single subsequent swim is exponentially harder because you've got to forget what happens. And you've got to kind of con yourself into believing that you can actually do this.
And just for, again, if people don't know, like, you go on, you're just wearing a pair of Speedos, right? I mean, it's just, you know, you're not in a wetsuit, you're not in a dry suit, that you're just literally wearing a pair of Speedos and you're swimming in this, and it's dark, right? This is
completely black water. Yeah. And it's 4.5 kilometers to the bottom of the ocean. And I remember just about to dive in and thinking to myself, if things go horribly wrong now, how long is it going to take for me to sink the 4.5 kilometers to the bottom of the Arctic Ocean, which is the worst possible thought you can have.
And on that point, and I just want to pivot from sort of climate change and swimming to, I suppose, just doing extraordinary things. You shared a story that I think the Inuit told you about two wolves. Can you share? Because I think this pertains to this very swim.
Well, so the Inuit people, they say, and First Nations people, they say that in every single person, there are two wolves. In every single person, there's a good wolf and there's a bad wolf, and they're having this constant fight. And which one is going to win in this epic battle? Well, they say it's the wolf which you feed. And I remember the night before the swim thinking to myself about all the things which could possibly go wrong when you dive into water which is minus 1.7 degrees centigrade, which actually is quite a long list of all things which can go wrong. And you're 7 days sailing away from the nearest hospital. And throughout the night, all I had been doing was thinking about these things, and then waking up and realizing, I'd better start feeding. I've got to get that bad wolf out of this cabin right now. Otherwise, this swim is never going to happen.
And look, I mean, literally, I was having this conversation with one of my colleagues. What we're trying to do isn't as dangerous as that, but I think sometimes you have low moments. And, I talk about people losing their mojo, but I think this idea of these two wolves and this battle,
That's not to say that all I'm thinking about is a good wolf and everything's going to work out okay. Yeah. We've done the training. We've done the planning. There's a safety plan there, and I just now have to rely on that.
Yeah. How many years did you plan this swim?
Well, it was about 5 years of training to really get ready for something like that.
Yeah, it's meticulous planning and execution, right?
Yes. Yeah. But then there comes a time when you have to commit and you have to dive in and you have to go for it. And you don't forget diving into the North Pole.
And look, I mean, we're filming this, we're in London. One of the things when I first heard you speak, you were speaking at a pension fund summit. So it was a room full of people in charge of the UK's largest pension funds. And, in order to do these things, you need to raise money, right? I think one of the things that's easy to forget, love it or hate it, but we live in a capitalist system and money makes the world go round. So you need the planning, you need the execution, but each one of these things needs funding. Yes. Do you want to sort of talk about funding? Because you and I have a common friend in Hendrik from 91, but previously Investec. Do you want to sort of talk about the journey there? Because I always think you need leadership. You're providing leadership at the front line, but you need leaders like Hendrik to step up as well.
Yeah, it was interesting because I went around looking for sponsorship for this swim across the North Pole. And it's not a cheap swim because you have to go aboard. There's only one way to get there, and that's aboard a Russian icebreaker, which goes there twice a year. And it's very, very expensive. And the team is 6 people. And, where am I going to be able to raise the money for this? And every single company I went to, they'd say, okay, what's the water temperature? I'd say minus 1.7. Has anyone done it? No. And then you could just see them thinking to themselves, I don't want to take this risk. I walked into Hendrik du Toit's office and I said to him, I want to do this. Same set of questions. And you know what he said to me? He said to me, I want my company to be the first to the North Pole. So it was a completely different mindset. And you know what? I give speeches now every single day, and it's many years later. And always that video comes up with Hendrik's company written across it. Yeah. So it was a good investment, and I'm very, very grateful to him for starting that journey.
It reminds me of one of my favorite TED Talks. It's on YouTube, and it's literally 5 minutes, and it talks about leadership. And there's this crazy guy who gets up and he's topless and he starts dancing, and everyone's sat down, and he's just dancing away, waving in his hand. Everyone looking at him like, dude, what are you doing? And then one other person gets up and starts dancing with him. And then suddenly 2 or 3 get up. And then about a minute or 2 minutes later, the entire hill get up and start dancing. And the point is that leadership, we need the crazy people. And I put you in the camp of the crazy people. That first guy doing the insane, extraordinary, whether it swimming, in the North Pole or whatever insane thing you're doing. But you do need the Hendricks to step up, right? The second follower.
Yes.
The third follower, yes, who then make it safe, yes, for others to follow suit. And I just think, anyway, I think it's really important point to understand the entire ecosystem of change, and how we make it happen. But at the end of this talk, I still remember it was sort of like Easter 2019. Your sort of call to arms to the room was to affect change, because there's one thing doing these extraordinary things, but the other thing is like create change. And I think it's something you don't get enough kudos for, is you said you need 2 things. You need access and you need influence. And, right now the world is in an interesting place between the US and China and Russia. But the work that you did off the back of that got you incredible access, yes, to Russia. I think they were very open to engage with you. Can you unpack why that was, why they responded so well to you? Something that is maybe sort of counterintuitive to people who maybe just consume the media we get here in the UK or in the US.
Yeah, I mean, cold water swimming is a language which Russians understand. Yeah. Every single Russian, as a young boy, as a young girl, would have gone down to the river in the middle of winter, and their parents would have cut a hole in the ice and then have jumped into it. The only way to get to the North Pole is on a Russian icebreaker. And so when they heard that a person had actually swum for nearly 19 minutes in just a Speedo, that gets you access. Okay. So you've got the access, you can go to Russia, you can get onto state television, you can start telling your story about what is happening. And we were trying to get a protected area done in the other part of the world, down in Antarctica, down in the Ross Sea, which is just an amazing place. I mean, if you sail from the bottom of New Zealand and you sail from 40 degrees south to 50 to 60 to 70, eventually you're going to see this thing which looks a little bit like the White Cliffs of Dover, but it's not. It's a Ross ice shelf. It's pure ice. And this area was one of the most pristine places on the planet. We were trying to get this thing protected. And so I went down there and I did a swim. The only country which still needed persuading was Russia. So I did a swim down there and afterwards went to Russia. And they opened their arms. They said, come in, come and talk. And so it was literally from one government minister to the next, to the next, to the next. So you got access, you've got influence, but you also need to have an idea, right? And you need to have the luck. And as you say, you need to have the funding to be able to do all this thing. You put all these things together, and the end result was that eventually we got that area declared as a marine protected area. It's the size of Britain, France, Germany, Italy, all put together, largest in the world.
That is just incredible. And, if hopefully people have watched Ocean with David Attenborough, the plight of our oceans is horrific. Lewis, you've been calling out whether it's overfishing, whether it's plastic pollution, and obviously the devastating effect of climate change. But you talked about swimming. Is that the swim? Was that a different swim when you went down to the Antarctic, or was this the swim that you're referring to when you went down?
No, that's a different one. So in East Antarctica, the issue which we're facing there are what are called supra-glacial lakes. So these are melted pools of water on top of the ice sheet, over 65,000 in summer. And what happens is these pools of water get into rivers. The rivers then go across the ice sheet. The water then drills through the ice all the way down to the bedrock and lubricate it. And so it goes into the sea. And so I decided, okay, how can you tell a story about this? And so I decided I'm going to swim down one of these rivers. And it's quite something, because I remember swimming down that river and I take a breath to the right and all I'm seeing is white. I take a breath to the left and it's white. And there is just nothing there. It is absolutely beautiful and pristine and incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that it is technically a desert, right?
Yes.
And I mean, for those listening in, we're looking at a picture of Lewis swimming on top of the ice in this beautiful blue, but it is totally unnatural. It shouldn't be like that. That is a consequence of climate change. I wanted to go back to sort of marine protected areas. I think, what is the thing that you want to do? Because I think one thing is to be known for this extraordinary person who does these crazy swims, but there needs to be a so what. And can you just paint a picture of how much ocean has been protected as a result of you raising awareness of your access and influence?
Yeah, about the size of Western Europe. Wow. Yeah, so about 3.5 million square kilometers. So these are protected areas in the Ross Sea around and various other places, including South Georgia, the South Sandwich Islands.
And what does what does that mean, not in legal terms, but in practical terms?
So these are fully protected. So this is no drilling, no extraction, no drilling for oil, no drilling for gas, no commercial fishing. In the United Kingdom, if we were to have a marine protected area, you couldn't have water companies pouring raw sewage into this. You couldn't have gunnery exercises, allowing nature to fully recover.
So, I mean, it is terrifying how little of our UK coastline is marine protected. I mean, where you're from, Plymouth National Marine, I think the UK's first national marine park, but if in our UK coastline, it is just pathetically low. So we've talked about the loss of fish and biodiversity in your lifetime, and at the same time, we've got this goal to restore nature in 30 by 30. Restoring nature, I think people can get behind beavers. People might even get behind reintroduction of lynx. But, we talked about wolves earlier. Wolves used to be common all across Europe, all over the world. You've done this amazing swim off Martha's Vineyard on the 50th anniversary of Jaws, the movie, about sharks. Why don't we talk about apex predators? Yeah. What are the myths? What are the reality? Why are they so important in a functioning ecosystem?
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is if you want to have a healthy planet, you need to have a healthy ocean. And if you want to have a healthy ocean, you're going to need to have predators. So sharks are absolutely essential for a healthy ocean. I mean, they're akin to the lions in the savannah of Africa. Imagine if you were hypothetically to take out all the lions. Well, then very, very soon there'll be a multitude of impala and gazelle and wildebeest and zebra. They'll eat all the vegetation, all the grass, all the bushes, and soon your whole ecosystem is going to collapse. And it's exactly the same. If you take out all the sharks, then soon you're going to have a watery desert. And so this was a swim around Martha's Vineyard, which is where the film Jaws was made 50 years ago. And it was about trying to highlight just actually how important they are, because in that movie they were demonized, that they're coming after us, they're about to kill us, and then nothing of the sort. They're absolutely essential. But the numbers of sharks being killed every year is just truly shocking. On average, globally, 274,000 are killed each and every single day.
Wow.
I mean, you multiply that over a year, it's 100 million sharks. It's an ecocide. It's complete madness. So we need sharks. We need polar bears. We need leopard seals. We need wolves. We need lynxes. We need all these animals. They actually bring life. They don't just take it.
And I think that is a mindset that we're going to have to embrace. I know in Holland, where they've done a wonderful job of rewilding. In fact, the site that inspired the Nep estate, they're talking about bringing wolves back to there. And so they've basically re-meandered the rivers. They've connected the ecosystem. They've brought back bison and various other things. But the next step would be to bring back wolves. But obviously, people are concerned about these things.
And I understand it. I get it. I'm frightened of sharks. So, I trained in a beach in Cape Town where we had a number of encounters where people lost their lives. So there's never an occasion where I'm swimming with a great whites where I'm not frightened. But one has to educate the public. They're not out to get us. On average, globally, about 20 people die from shark encounters every year. Okay, the numbers, and you think about how many people are actually swimming. I mean, millions and millions and millions of people are swimming every single year in close proximity to sharks, and they do so entirely safely.
I mean, wonderful creatures, and as you say, it's amazing how a movie can do so much damage to our perceptions of an animal. I always think about the humble beaver and the damage that's been done in C.S. Lewis's Tales of Narnia, and the misperception about beavers eating fish. But it goes back to shifting baselines where we don't realize what we've lost, and we need to get comfortable with bringing back these species to the levels that they need to exist at. And I do want to come, as we sort of draw out this, I want to come back to here, the UK. Swimming the channel is one thing, but you did this really cool thing where you swam the length of the channel. Can you bring to life what you saw or didn't see, the changing color, like just through that swim? How did the water change?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I swam from Land's End all the way to Dover. So it's 528 kilometers. It's the full length of the English Channel as opposed to swimming across the English Channel. So I've swum the whole length of the south coast of England. And when you start in Cornwall, I mean, it's beautiful. The water is so fresh and it's so clear, and you can see down to the bottom and you can see fish. You then start going along the coast, and then slowly that beautiful, clean places start getting a little bit dirtier. You then get to Portsmouth, and then it's not so easy to start seeing the bottom. You then get to Dover, and when you get to Dover, there's obviously a lot of chalk in the water, and so you can't see anything. Go around the coast into the North Sea, and suddenly it's brown. You cannot see anything at all. But that's in terms of the visibility. But I think the big change I saw was what the coastline was like and what the wildlife was like from when I was a little boy. Yeah. So in my lifetime, I'm 55 years old, we've lost over 70% of the world's wildlife. I mean, think about that moment. We've lost over 70% of the world's wildlife in my lifetime. And during this swim, it took me 49 days. I saw a few dolphins. I saw a few seabirds. I saw lots of jellyfish. So there's a proliferation of jellyfish in the waters around the United Kingdom. Okay,
which isn't good, by the way.
No, that's not good. The reasons for those are multifaceted, but it's overfishing, and it's rising water temperatures, and it's increasing nutrients in the water because of agricultural runoff. Okay, but that's all I saw. So I saw a few dolphins, one turtle, few seabirds, and lots of jellyfish in 49 days. We have completely overfished our waters. And so what I was urging the British government to do was to commit to protect at least 30% of the world's oceans by 2030. I got to the end there. The Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, came down to the beach, and he said to me, "Lewis, we've heard you." I said to him, "Michael, I wish you'd heard me before I swam for 49 days. But they then committed to that target. They went to the United Nations, they urged other nations to join them. And since then, virtually every single country in the world has agreed to this target, protecting 30% of land and sea by 2030. I could never have imagined something so wonderful. But commitments are one thing. Yeah. We now need the delivery.
And at Rebalance Earth, our company values are hustle muscle. And I think, you have hustle muscle in spades. But it's radical candor. And I was going to say radical candor to Michael Gove would be, it's easy to sign up to net zero. It's easy to say 30 by 30, but it is 2025 right now. Yep. We've got 5 years left. The level of marine protection in the UK is woefully low. And, I think, we need to get stuff done, and we need to get stuff done fast. The people who listen to our podcasts they tend to be either very senior people at pension funds, so they can influence billions and billions of pounds. senior people at big corporates. Let's shift from awareness to action. What do you want people listening to this podcast to do, like now, like in 2026? Like what should we be putting on the board agenda for 2026?
It's interesting. I did a very big beach cleanup in Mumbai, and the pollution on the beach was literally shoulder height to begin with. And I remember feeling completely overwhelmed when I walked down to the beach. And the head of the person, the head person who was cleaning up this beach was a young barrister called Afroz Shah. And he said to me, Lewis, start at your feet. Okay. So my starting point is we've got to start protecting the waters around the United Kingdom. We're one of the most degraded nature countries in the world. We've got to start here. We've got to start investing. And that takes a shift in your mindset. We've got to believe that we can do it, and we've got to invest. I mean, the harsh reality is that we get what we pay for. We get what we invest, and we haven't invested enough in the United Kingdom.
So the thing we're incredibly proud of is that using pension fund money, West Yorkshire pension fund money, we have just funded Europe's largest oyster reef restoration. It'll be 4 million oysters. And there is partnering with Nestle, who need healthy fish in the North Sea to support their supply chain. They understand healthy seas, healthy fish is critical to their business. And so all of a sudden you can be a pensioner in the West Yorkshire Pension Fund, and part of the money that will pay your retirement is literally coming from this growing and surviving oyster reef. We've lost 95% of our native oysters. Next year, we want to work on 100 million, and we'd love to restore 1 billion oysters by 2035. And so I suppose I just wanted to ask a favour.
That's a great target, 1 billion. Yeah. And sorry,
it's doable.
Yes. And just to explain, the fish aren't going into chocolates.
The fish aren't going into chocolate. And in fact, these oysters aren't to be eaten. These oysters oyster reefs are like the coral reefs of the North Sea. And, I've been looking at videos of just a few bricks laid last year, and already juvenile fish are coming back, and that biodiversity is coming back. And oysters clean the water. They're amazing at dissipating wave energy and coastal erosion, and they are critical for marine biodiversity and restoring the fish in the North Sea, which then can bring back jobs. So it's critical for local communities on our coastline. So the sort of payback is financial, it's natural, it's social and inspirational. But I was going to ask you a favor. Do you fancy, it's a short swim, I think you could you don't even need to do any training, you'd need to train me.
Yes.
But maybe it's off the coast of Norfolk, but maybe next year we could swim out. It's about 2 kilometres off the coast of Norfolk to visit Project Lona and the 4 million oysters.
I'd be happy to do that. It's a very manageable request.
Yeah, well, Lewis, always a pleasure, and I could just spend hours with you. But I think just thank you so much for everything you've done over the last 35 years. You inspired me. Your talk moved me to move from just being a finance guy, someone who cared about financial freedom, to financial freedom in a world worth living in, and this idea that money can be a force for good. And so I'd like to think, like Hendrik, you've inspired me to stand up and follow your lead. So keep leading. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. We're on a mission to make nature an investable asset class, which means we can help create a world worth living in. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please please subscribe, and please share it. Thank you very much.